Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you all had a good lunch. Welcome to everyone for this session. Before we begin, just a few things to keep in mind. As I said, please fill up the seats at the front so people who are joining us later can take the seats at the back. Please put your phones on silent mode. The loos are on the right. Tea and coffee are available in the cafeteria, and the smoking area is to your left. We request you to please wash your cups. We'll be taking questions at the end. Please wait for the mic to be passed to you before asking the question. Welcome to Discovering the Greatest Stories Ever Told, where our speakers explore how one anthologizes the greatest stories from a language. It's my pleasure to introduce our speakers. A.J. Thomas, he's an Indian English poet, editor, translator with more than 20 books to his credit. He has translated works of illustrious Malayalam writers like O.N.V. Kurup, Paul Zakaria, and M. Mukundan, and edited books by U.R. Ananthamurthy. He served as the editor of the Sahitya Academy's journal Indian Literature and co-edited the Best of Indian Literature. He's a recipient of Katha Award, AKMG Prize, and Vodafone Crossword Award. He holds a senior fellowship from the Department of Culture, Government of India, and was an honorary fellow, Department of Culture, Government of South Korea. He was a guest speaker in several writers' conferences and readings in South Korea, Australia, Thailand, Hong Kong, and Nepal. He has recently edited The Greatest Malayalam Stories Ever Told, an anthology of 50 short stories sourced from modern classics of Kerala. Aienla Ozukum is publishing director at Aleph Book Company. She's worked in publishing for more than 10 years and with acclaimed authors such as Shashi Tharoor, Romila Thapar, Rudrangshu Mukherjee, N. Ram, G. N. Devi, B. N. Goswami, Upinder Singh, and Meena Arora Nayak. She holds an MA in English Literature from Delhi University and a graduate diploma in publishing from the National Book Trust, India. Our moderator for the session is Pooja Sagar. Pooja leads the Word Lab and the library teams at the Indian Institute for Human Settlements. She's a bilingual writer with interests in non-fiction, personal essays, and translations spread across academic and non-academic spaces. Her current work is on the history of medicine in India and autobiographies of doctors and Vaidyans in Malayalam. Over to you, Pooja.
Thank you very much, Sophia. All right, post-lunch, let's have an interesting session in this afternoon. So it's a pleasure, Aienla and A.J. Thomas, to have you here with us at IHS. Thank you for your participation in the panel. So now, The Greatest Stories Ever Told is a series that puts together brilliant short stories from different languages, translated, and the publisher is Aleph, and they have already done 12 books in this series, 14, yeah, covering the best short stories in Malayalam, Urdu, Odia, Hindi, Tamil, Assamese, Gujarati, Telugu, Marathi, Punjabi, and Kannada is forthcoming. Along with The Greatest Stories Ever Told by Aruna Vasina. So that's a lot. And these books are fantastic collections because, first of all, they look really good on bookshelves. All right, so if any of you are planning to buy and pass on these books as family heirlooms to your offsprings, then please do. So the series is fantastic. And also what I also noticed is that all of the books have fantastic introductions written by very well-known editors in each of these languages. And so the introduction by itself is a very good read. And also the collections put together are very thoughtfully put together. So they're very, so some of the stories that you will read in these collections are rare and less read works that have mostly first appeared in perhaps in magazine cultures which were prevalent, which are no longer or perhaps of dwindling relevance in our society. So I'd like to start with Aienla and try to understand Aienla is the creative force behind the series. So I wanted to try to understand about the genesis of this series. When did you perhaps start thinking about?
Thank you, Pooja, for the wonderful words that you have described our series. We began with the idea of doing a series of translated fiction. This was not a new idea because there have been a lot of translated fiction uh, around, but we thought that some of them were of indifferent quality, so we decided that we should put together an anthology, a series which has the best of everything. Now, then we also decided that best of the stories in the original and in their translations. Then it also struck us that the short story form was not a very was a new literary form, and we thought it would be possible for the editors who were putting together these works to select what, in their opinion, were the best stories in that language. Now, you can disagree with the title, with the greatest stories ever told, because that's the title that is common to all the books in the series. But I think it contributed to the success of the series, even though you might disagree that these stories are not the greatest in your opinion, but it is plausible that these are greatest stories. So we ran with it, and I'm so glad that we did, because the first book in the series was published in 2016, which was the greatest Bengali stories ever told, translated and edited by Arunava Sinha. The following year, we published the greatest Urdu stories ever told, again by one of the greatest Urdu translators, Muhammad Memon. And after that, since then, we have published, like you said, 14 books in the series, and all of them has been successful. Now, so yeah, that's how the series started. I think we've published almost all the major languages in the country. We have Kannada left. I think we are trying to be a bit more creative, and we are going to have the greatest short stories from the Northeast, even though the Northeast does not have one particular language. There are many languages, but we are working on that. So I think those are the two books that we are really looking forward.
Right. The title is a bit sort of it's a you can refute the title. Yes. It's an arguable title, yeah. So to say. Right. So, but they truly, like, some of the greatest stories can be found in the.
I think, yeah, most of all the series will have at least some of everyone present here. You will agree that yes, these are some of the greatest stories in that language. Yeah, and you're right. We can argue about it, but those are final points that.
Correct. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about how you identified the editors for each languages.
It was, we looked for translators, scholars, or critics who were accomplished in that language, and after that we left it to them to select the best stories, and then that's how the final selection came about. Of course, there was a bit of going, we went back and forth, but because, like, for example, when we were putting together Malayalam stories, Thomas wanted one of Vijayan's, not the hanging. He wanted another story, but we wanted the hanging because we love that story. So yeah, so that's how we worked.
All right. And Arunava was one of the first editors commissioned?
Yeah, he was one of the first editors that we commissioned, and then Memon. And after that, we have for Marathi, Ashutosh Poddar, Telugu, Tamrapani Dasu, and Dasu Krishnamurti. So yeah, all the editors or translators of the series, they are experts in that particular language, so we went with them, and I think we made our choice was right, is what I feel.
Fantastic. Thomas, when did you start working on the project?
Let me first thank City Scripts, the organizers, particularly you, Pooja. And also, I thank Aienla for bringing out such a fantastic book. You know, it's a wonderful cover. Everyone is in love with the cover, first of all. And this book itself, you know, like many other, most of these are of the same design or similar design, but, you know, the series running in a kind of a combination of other. But this one stands out, everyone says. So I thank Aienla for that. Then, yeah, coming to the project about, before talking about the translation as such, I have to share with you the kind of interest that I had in reading literature, you know, from the beginning. So I have read a lot of Malayalam fiction, short fiction, and poetry from my early years. And you see, I have a collection of most of these short stories collection and a collection of all these literary journals at home. I used to carry them around. And so that kind of thing. And then there is a kind of break which I have to share with you. So I was working in the Kerala Tourism Development Corporation, Arananivas, in Periyar, Tekadi. For 16.5 years I was there. And I used to come across, I met Salman Rushdie, all these people, you know, the writers, you know, in the younger days now, of course, Sir Angus Wilson, all these people, you know, Pritish Nandi at the time, a literary star, all these people used to come. Like that, there used to be a lot of foreign writers also, or non-Malayalis who wanted to know about the literature, about, and the foreigners would ask about Indian literature, and I told them there are 24 other literatures of the country. Ours is Malayalam, and naturally to represent, you know, to explain to them, I started translating samples. You know, that's how I began translating, and that grew into a kind of academic course when Professor U.R. Anandamurthy started the School of Letters in Mahatma University in 1989. And I chose translation as an academic stream. And my dissertation was the actual translation of 17 Malayalam short stories, you know, after modern Malayalam short stories. It began like that. So that kind of background is there before taking up. And of course, sitting there in Sahitya Academy for more than 2 decades, editing, selecting, these things also play into the act of anthologizing. You know, it's very easy that way to see how, you know, I jumped at the opportunity when Aienla approached me. I think Mini Krishna suggested my name to you. Yeah. Mini Krishna, of course, you know, the grand dame of literary translation. She suggested the name to Aienla, and she came and caught hold of me. And here is
So
what
when
we
did you
have.
start this project?
We started in 2017, late 17,
Okay.
and 18, 19. I submitted the manuscript, but by early 20, we had the famous COVID, and we had to sit over that. Like that, it went. It came out only in 2023 November, and there were more stories than in the usual. I think most of these other, you know, I think 35 is the maximum that you have, no? In Urdu, I think.
Malayalam has 50 stories. The other series, they are like 21, 25, 18, some of them. But since the Malayalam literature is also, you know, quite a big, huge literature, so, you know, we couldn't. In fact, we have another one in the works.
No, we spilt over, you know, there are more stories that later, you know, later in the narration I'll tell you that, yeah.
Right. So Thomas is somebody who sort of summarizes and writes about the evolution of short stories since In fact, he locates the beginning of short story tradition to 1891 with Vasana Vigradi, written by Kesari Vengel Kunyiraman Nayanar, which appeared in a magazine called Vidya Vinodini. Some of the issues of Vidya Vinodini, I was later on, I was doing it for my research, are available on archive.org. So that attributing about 132 years of literary history to the short story form in Kerala. Could you perhaps tell us a little bit about the evolution of short story in Malayalam literature? I know it's a vast area to cover, but perhaps some of the key events or key points from the...
You're right about that. It's about 133 years, to be exact, you know. But like MP Paul or Sukumaradi quoted him in Indian literature itself 30 years ago, it is by the mid-1930s that the proper short story form emerged. Before that, it was, you know, like after Vengayal Kunjanaman Nayanar's Vasana Vikriti, there were a lot of other writers like Ambadi, Narayana Puduval, Marquesi, and E.V. Krishnapilla, the great E.V. Krishnapilla, I have to say. There is a great writer of prose in Malayalam, early 20th century. There were so many who wrote, you know, it was the end of the 1920s and early 1930s. They wrote stories to bring about social reform, you know, in the Nambudiri community, among the Nayar, the crumbling Tarawad. All these, you know, socio-anthropological subjects were covered by them. But these were loose bundles of narration, not in the short story form. But by about the Lalitambika Antarjanam started writing in 1929, you know, short stories. But about the time Keshavadev, Punkunambarki later came 5 years later, but Takadi, Bashir, and Lalitambika Antarjanam, these writers began to write in realistic mode, but social realistic mode, and they were connected to the socialist movement, you know, generally. So you can just say that it is the living literature movement, or Jival Sahityam, which progressed into the progressive writers, you know, the all India phenomenon of the progressive writers movement.
That was in around...
That was 1936. The official movement was inaugurated. But before that, the Malayalam short story, around that time, 34, 35, MP Paul, in his first edition of Chirukatha Prasthanam, the short story movement, he mentions to the form as Khanda Katha Prasthanam, not Chirukatha. The name Chirukatha emerged only in 1936. So it went on like that. And then these realistic writers, as social realists, they progressed into the 40s and 50s and early 50s. That is the kind of span. But the progressive movement, even now there is a Purogavana Kala Sahitya Sangham is there. So it goes on. But this particular committed, kind of socially committed writing, writing for, you know, with the purpose, express purpose of social reform, it lasted about 2.5 decades, you know, in one go. But these stories are not of that period, but by those same writers, but they are all, these stories are all beginning in the 50s. In the 50s to the, you know, end century, the late 90s, most of them, but spilling over to, say, the first decade of the 21st century also. But mainly, this is the kind of arc that the stories cover. And so many movements in between. So if I go into detail, it will just go on, but how, you know, this is the way. But I can tell you that the modernist movement, you know, which began from the, from S.K. Pottekad and Urub, these were the romantic realists, and M.T. Vasudevan is a big name in romantic realism. So from there, O.V. Vijayan, beginning with O.V. Vijayan, you have a definite modernist entry to the modernist era in the late 50s, and it goes on from there. And I'll jump to the next after-modern.
Postmodern.
Yeah, but I don't say postmodern. It's not really postmodern. You can't say postmodern. Maybe quote-unquote postmodern or post-modern.
Okay.
So that is a kind of writing that we had. That is till the mid-80s, you can say. Then you have the after postmodern or after modern, I'll say. So this kind of writing comes, the new kind of writing, the very new kind of writing comes after the emergency, after all those disasters, after the beginning of the Gulf money pouring in, after the beginning of the Old Spice or the 555 cigarette coming to the, and after the people went about, buying the sear fish with asking money when the poor people are queuing up for their ailas and matis. That kind of picture emerges suddenly in the 80s onwards. So the kind of short stories that emerged after that.
Right. So that's a long history. I'll come back to that. So you're right, because what M.B. Paul says is the Ghandakada Prasthanam, and then Sukumar Arikod then writes about Charagada Prasthanam. That's what you've quoted. Okay.
But M.P. Paul is the one who gave, again he used Ghandakada in 1936, but in 44 or 45, when he relaunches the second edition, he calls it the Charagada Prasthanam. So that's how it happens.
All right. Okay. So now, so you also talk about in your introduction why setting a time frame was important for you, between what period to what period. Could you tell us a little bit about the relevance of setting a time frame, and perhaps why did you avoid the social reformist stories prior to the 50s?
I haven't done any particular fixing of the time frame. I'm just following the historical progression of the form, From the time when the form evolves into a particular, form with the Western, specimens features. So that's what we call the fully formed short story. It's a Western form in any case. So that happens from the mid-1930s. From then, it is following the different movements, prasthanams, like realist, the various shades of realism. Then you come to the modernism, then the after-modern, then the millennial, and, it's like that. So the sweep is, for these are to be, for the greatest Malayalam stories, when we think of a greatest, the nomenclature comes the greatest, then it has to be something of a classical thing. So these are modern classics, without doubt. Without doubt, these are modern classics, and these are, definitely covering that period. So where, you give a little distance to what is classical. It's not a current, there cannot be a current classic, So that kind of a time frame is given, but that is within this natural progression of the story, not any particular.
No, I think what I'm trying to ask you is, see, you can put together an anthology without a chronology also, right? Like you can sort of put together based on stylistic aspects or other features of the short stories themselves. But here you're intentionally...
it's chronology.
Yeah,
it's chronological.
So if you start reading from the beginning towards the end, you see this progression of literary movements as he talks about in the introduction, which then is actually a good gives you a good understanding of the progress of social movements as well,
Yeah,
right?
that is a kind of presentation I wanted to make. I wanted to represent the Kerala society also. The progression or otherwise of the Kerala society.
Correct. Could you talk about, there are a couple of stories with strong Marxist and communist influences,
Yeah.
bunch of stories with, again, Purogamana Sahitya
Yeah.
Prasthanam, modern European sort of fiction influences. Could you tell us a little bit about some of the important social and cultural moments?
You see, this is just to say the beginning of socialism. That is in the 1920s, like figures like P. Krishnapilla and EMS comes later. All the others, they come through the Socialist Congress. From the Congress Party, the Socialist Congress is formed. They are then, taken up by the communist ideas, and that's how the communism comes to Kerala. So that, apart from, the political mobilization, a lot of social mobilization takes place, especially after, the social reformers like Narayana Guru, Ayyankali, K.P. Karuppan, Poyigela Pachan, and Sahodaran Ayyappan. Sahodaran Ayyappan from Paravur. He is he's called Sahodaran because of the Sahodara Prasthana. He believed that all are brothers and sisters. So that kind of an idealistic push, that is, the three ideals of the French Revolution: liberty, equality, and fraternity. So this was, this kind of idealistic playing out of these values. So this you can see from the earliest writers, like Bashir or Takari. Everyone is looking for the ideal. It is not like now we have maybe Noor or neo-Noor films, or you have a very Gothic kind of. It is not that, Not that it is there very much, you look at Kottaradal Shankani's Aienla, you see a whole range of a little bit, well, before here, there was a horror fiction session going on.
Yes. Yeah.
But we had actual horror fiction in those stories also, and a lot of.
And Aidihim.
Aienla is a 7-volume legends, it's a garland of legends. Many of them are horror fiction, examples of horror fiction. So that kind of thing was going on. That kind of writing, that kind of entertainment writing was going on. How, I've just skipped a little bit of the development part of the short story at that time. Because the mid-19th century saw the consolidation of prose writing in Malayalam. The missionaries, the Christian missionaries brought about the translation of the Bible and their catechism. These were all in prose, staged prose. And, newspapers like Malayalam Manorama, Rashtradeepika, Nasrani Deepika, so not Rashtradeepika comes later. And later in the 20th century, early 20th century, Madhubhumi, and Deshabhimani, then Kerala Kaumudi, all these newspapers come about in the first half of beginning with the latter half of the 19th century till the early quarter of the 20th century. All these newspapers come, and a lot of magazines also. And these are all catering to the common reader. The very common reader, it's not the elitist reader, it's the common reader. So to entertain them, short story was the best, print in full page story. So people, for entertainment, they fell back on short. Just like we are watching TV nowadays, they used to read short stories. So that is one stage in the development of the story.
So novel is for the elite audience, and
that is the
short story for the common man.
The beginning of Indulekha. You see, Chandu Menon says it is for the entertainment of his wife that he has written this novel Pustakam and the Bhariyake Vaikan. So this kind of, even C.V. Raman Pilla's Marthanda Varma, Nedingadi's Kundalada is the first novel, but modeled on, then soon came this Indulekha and Marthandavarma, all these were for those kind of readers who could, afford the time.
Okay.
Short stories, you can just read and go
Like a consumable.
Yeah.
Okay. Now back to Aienla. Now, what is the difference between a novel publication and a short story publication? And I mean, are there differences, so to say? And are there some risk involved in short story publication?
As a general rule, and there are always exceptions to the rule, novels tend to do much better than short stories. But then short stories in translation, they fare quite poorly, and that is why we had to come up with this novel way of presenting them in this greatest series. But as I was listening to you and Thomas, I was thinking there is because Thomas says that short stories tend to sell more, do more. But in my experience, in our experience as English language publishers, the experience is quite the opposite. But there are classical writers of short stories like Premchand, Manto, and in the English language, Ruskin Bond, Arkenarayan. Their short stories, they do really well. So there's always this discrepancy, or some things which we don't really understand. That's going on between, I would say, regional language readers and readers in the English language is what I could, that's what I could gather from the conversation between the two of you and from my experience as a publisher.
Right. So, is it harder for a young author to start off as a short story writer?
Definitely. We have had young writers, new voices, promising voices who come to us with short stories. But our advice to them would be, why don't you write a novel first? And once you've established, write a great novel, and once you've established your name, yourself as an author, then we can look into publishing your short stories, because that's when people will buy I would like to read short stories, is what, we tell them. This is, But at the same time, anthologies do well. Short stories, anthologies, they do well. When they, the Greatest Stories series is one example. Before that, we had put together an anthology called A Clutch of Indian Masterpieces, which starts from Tagore till, till the youngest author on that list, which is like, maybe he will be in his 40s now. So that did really well. After that, we did another volume called A Case of Indian Marvels, which featured just the millennials and the Generation Z writers. That also did really well. Okay. So anthologies do well, but I think short story collection, unless there are exceptional stories, it's a bit difficult to sell short stories by a single writer.
So here I have to make a little correction or clarification. What I mentioned about the short story being popular is in the beginning of the 20th century, end of 19th century. And after that, poetry and short stories were, even now in Madhurabhumi you can see that. Poetry and short stories are inseparable in Malayalam. They have at least 3 poems, 2 stories. Like that, it's a kind of staple diet for our Malayali literary sense. Novels happen, like she said, novels sell. But short story collections also in Malayalam, they sell, but in English, it's different.
That's just a reminder for the audience here to go pick up more short stories and, read them, because they're fantastic. And I think recently also, like, there are some stories, short story anthologies, which are doing really well. Like, for instance, Jayant Kaikini's No Presence, and also Midun #2.
DSC, he won
he won the DSC prize because it was also translated by Tejaswini Niranjana. And also experimental short fiction, such as, there's a Bluff store outside, and then you will find Kurili Manikavale's work there. And some of my students are here, and I always bring in Kurili's work to classrooms to teach. So
what she mentioned is about the market. For poetry
yeah.
and short fiction, there's no market. That's the real thing.
Yeah.
In English.
No, I'm surprised because it's a contradiction, because the form itself is very powerful, and it stretches boundaries of writing very
In the
much.
languages, in the powerful languages, short story collections, not anthologies, collections by individual authors, they go very well.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah. Yeah. And they are mostly translated works, is it?
Not like that. Not entire this thing. Again, mostly anthologies or representative collections.
All right. Okay. So and also so anthologizing is one way, but are there other ways in which you think about or ensure success of the short story in the market?
Packaging them differently, like we have brilliant covers for each of the books, and also the editors giving the readers quality in terms of focus and range in the stories. So I think that's those are the ways that we try to make sure that these books sell.
Okay. Okay, so Thomas, I think I'll come back to you now. And one of the things that this book does is that it features very well, actually, some of the marginalized voices, particularly bringing out voices in the Dalit and women writing spaces. And they cover a range of experiences. And could you tell us a little bit about the curatorial considerations that you had in mind?
You see, to tell you the truth, I haven't deliberately made any kind of reservation for women or Dalits. No. So when I made the same kind of statement when I was sharing a stage with K.R. Meera, she immediately mocked me, saying, no male will ever accommodate women. I said, no, not deliberately, but only unconsciously he will do that. She just made fun of me, like that, in a playful way. But definitely I did not, intend this percentage for women, this percentage for the, no. It's through my reading of the stories and, the stories which we have carrying in this collection, they are natural selections for their merit, not because it's by women or it's because Dalits, no. They are outstanding stories, all of them. All the stories. So I have to say that, wonderful stories by Saraswati Amma. That story, it was written in the mid-40s. So that is as, it's as fresh as written today. You can just, that kind of a situation, and presenting the female character as the most powerful, that's typical Saraswati Amma. The Swamiji and the nun, these are the two people, they were lovers in their Purvasrama, and they meet, and she pins him down with her arguments and then her affection again. Well, it's a fantastic kind of writing that is, that you can say postmodern. Like she wrote like that. Like Bashir's Premalekhanam, written in 1938. That is also a timeless story. If you translate and publish that story now, also it will be contemporary story. So that kind of spirit is there. Beginning with Saraswati Amma, you go on to this Lalitambika Andrajan's Thirendu Majumdar's mother. It's such a powerful story, So many people, my feedbacks about this story, there's so many writing. Also, Madhavekuti's Scent of a Bird. It's a haunting kind of representation of the woman's dilemmas when she sets out in the world to follow a profession, independently, away from the families, this thing, getting into the male world and trying her luck. She meets death. This kind of very stark telling of this fact, and through building language, through language building an atmosphere that is like. So that is Madhavikutti's writing. These are all brilliant writing in themselves, not because they are women writers, or Dalit writers. Dalit writers, you say Changranti Ada, or Siayappan's Niravatha Kayyani, or this story of a sickle. All these are outstanding stories.
Absolutely. And you've also translated all the stories in the book, right? So, and what was it like to wear the editor's hat at times and then shift to translators?
Aienla, with her here, with her presence, I can say that she was one of the mildest intrusive editors. She took exceptions to my academic kind of approach to translation, footnoting and all that. That won't happen in a trade publishing. You can't have it now because it will hinder reading. So instead of in text citations, you incorporate it in a narrative way. That is the only way you.
Right. Thomas was also telling us how Aienla made him remove.
Yeah, she gave
all the in-text citations.
A shape to the introduction, which she cut it down to at least 1/3. Or she suggested that I rephrase it to 1/3. Otherwise, it was a rambling kind of thing. My academic training was a great hindrance in bringing this thing. So now we have a very compact, readable kind of introduction here.
And as a translator, how did you go about?
Yeah, but her, she shared with you about. I had some preference about some stories, which she said, no, it won't go with the readers now. No, there were 2, 3.
The contention is about the O.V. Vijayan, choice of O.V. Vijayan.
TR story. Then there was another one. 2, 3 ones you took exception to.
It's always interesting when there's an editor and a writer.
Yeah, you insisted on this after the hanging and put down the rocks.
I don't think you can have an anthology of Malayalam stories without the hanging. I feel.
Okay.
Yeah, it's such a powerful story.
Absolutely. All right. So, Thomas, I'll ask you to read something from the book. And one of my favorite stories in this is a story by T.K.C. Vadadala, not a very well-known writer. Perhaps you could say a little bit about the writer himself, Vadadala. And also the story is called Changrandi Ada. And the character is Kochugarambi.
Yeah. So it's about, this is by a Dalit writer again. So Dalits were writing stories from the 50s itself, but they were not in their voice, for example. They were writing, most of them were with the Marxist Party or the Communist Party, and the party doesn't acknowledge caste, they're only class. And they won't do anything. I'm all admiration for all the humanism and brotherhood and equality that brought in, there's no doubt. But this kind of an unreal thing that brings about or looks the other way when caste comes in, and the caste is rampant, though in Kerala, in the modern progressive Kerala, it is not worn on one's sleeve, it is there. You see in Sarah Joseph's story, that is the caste in Kerala. And Sarah Joseph's story is about the so-called creamy layer sweat marks, Veyarpadayalangal. Professor Devan should be the name, but he's Devan because he is a Pulaya. So that way he can't do anything. He is sitting in a selection committee for admitting students on merit and reservation. And there is a Pulaya girl who has scored high marks on merit. She was won the 10th rank in the state. But the other upper caste Christian and other people sitting in a typically Thrissur, imaginably Thrissur kind of place, college, is not, the Tevan is not able to do anything when they ask this girl to come the reservation way, give up the general seat, because the general seat will bring lakhs of rupees for capitation. So this kind of caste thing exists in Kerala because though the party doesn't even now admit the existence of caste. So the class kind of stories that were written from the 50s, they looked the other way, or they did not indulge in bringing out the situation of the Pulaya or the scheduled castes in their stories. Or if they did, it's not remarkably openly. So T.K.C. Vadadala is the first major writer who did this, and his social reformist seal makes him declare this identity and come clean. So Sankranti Ada is one of his most well-known stories. And Sankranti is Sankranti. Ada is, the Malayalam steamed rice cake with molasses and scraped coconut, and it's a sweet dish. But this is an offering, typical offering given by the Pulayas to the departed souls at Sankranti. That's a major kind of offering. Like a Sradham also, this is an after-death continuation of the offerings to the spirit. So Sankranti Ada. Sankranti Ada, it begins with a song. It is a song, it's an agricultural laborer's song when they are engaged in transplanting paddy. But this 8 lines which I am going to recite belongs to a ballad, a folk ballad, which is called Chengannuradi. It belongs to the group of legends, narratives called Idanadan Pattugal, or the legends, the song legends of the Midlands. We have famously the Vadakkan Pattugal, the northern ballads, and the Tekkan Pattugal, the southern ballads. But this is Idanadan, the middle. So Chengannuradi's lines are used in this agriculture song. Tim, Timidim, Timidim, Timitara Daidara, Tim, Timidim, Timidim, Timitara Daidara. Hear, oh, hear my Chengannuramme, I have to go on a journey, Chengannuramme. Where to, oh my darling son? I have to go to Kunnamam Desham, my mother dear. Isn't the girl at Kunnamam my wedded wife, my mother? I had left her in the wedding pavilion and come away. I need to see the girl at Kunnamam once again. Please give me some kanji as soon as you can. So this is the beginning. This is the beginning where these agricultural laborers are singing in the field as they're working. The notes of the song rise like waves from the bosom of the paddy fields that stretch far and wide beyond what the eyes can see and beyond the reach of a beckoning call. The song that is sung during paddy planting comes out of the sweet, beautiful throat of some wench close to nature and gets repeated by equally worthy throats simultaneously in a lilting flow. Oh, what an otherworldly feeling. The laborers of the paddy fields are together immersing the entire universe in an ocean of bliss. The plucking of paddy saplings from the nursery and planting them in the wet fields in the Viripu way have begun. This is called Nirathu, and this is the time of Nirathu. Those women stand in a row in a paddy nursery where the saplings grow thickly together. The Pulaya women, young and old, are standing with their legs immersed in slush, reaching to their knees. Theirs is a rather large number. They are advancing like an army column. Their struggle is but creative and not destructive. There are 2 or 3 men right in the front leading the female army. Their job is to make the saplings in the nursery loose for those who pluck them for replanting. If the saplings are pulled upwards, they will be damaged. To avoid that happening, the base of the saplings with root and all has to be loosened along with the mud block they stand on. Men have to do this task. Using a hoe weighing 28 palams. Palam is a unit of weight in the Kerala way. It will be maybe 1/4 of a kilo. 28 palams. They loosen the mud blocks by cutting below the root level in the mud on which the saplings stand. And they are quickly advancing. Won't they lose face if they fail to supply saplings to be planted to those who move forward fast, replanting the paddy saplings? That is the reason why they are in a hurry. Are they fools to be outdone by women? Indeed. Tittannam tittannam taidaro timi, tittannam daru. Tittimmi tinnaidaru, timmi tinnaidaru. A spirited woman among the women laborers starts of the refrain, the intro of a new song. Following the speed and passion involved in the work, different shields are being introduced. The others repeat the song. The rains and showers are falling, the fields are all filled with water. The fields have been plowed, made ready. The sapling bunches are hurled towards the workers. Again, it's repeated, the song. Following the waves rising in the universe of that song, those laborers are repeating the lines in the tone of a sob. They have completely forgotten that they are a people who have been immersed in mud, reaching to their knees. They don't also think of the upper castes who climb on their shoulders and bite their ears. They have submitted themselves to the enchanting power of the goddess of music, who pushes all their sorrows into oblivion. However, Kochukarumbi is not in that world. She is merely planting paddy and advancing like a machine. She is not aware of whatever is happening around here, not even a trace of the sprightliness that is evident on the other's face is on hers. Last year also she had come to plant paddy saplings in this very field. It was Tevan who had loosened the saplings for her, advancing ahead. How exciting it was for her to plant the saplings he loosened and advanced. That scene from last year hadn't faded from her eyes. She remembered even now the Kuttupata, which is a light, rebellious song sung by farm laborers during planting or harvesting paddy. Other times it is sung to control the tempo of the work. That the other women laborers sang in a chorus, linking her and Tevan. That song had begun thus. As the rain showers, it showers. As the thunder roars, it thunders. Did you see the new bridegroom coming with a flowery mundu gracing his shoulders? When she listened to it then, she was abashed. When she remembers it now, her grief's dam bursts. Beautiful curly hair, large eyes, always with a reddish tint as if he was intoxicated. A broad chest covered with thick hair, sculpted hands and legs, limbs that would even put Krishna to shame. There wasn't a Pulaya woman who hadn't yearned to become Tevan's life partner, but somehow it was Kochukarumbi who became that lucky girl.
I think
The story, the Tevan dies too soon before they even have a child.
sorry, we had to cut short to the death
It goes
quickly.
on like that, but there is another character, Vallon, who was also a suitor, but who was rejected earlier by Kochukarumbi. But now, Vallon is a typical reformer youth, fired by scientific thoughts and all. So he comes forward and he tries to convince her to marry him. And for that, he is presenting all kinds of arguments, how, hankering after the dead, looking up to their, to appease their spirit. All these things are bunkum, so don't go for that. This kind of arguments he is presenting. And Shankranti Ada is, the crux of the story is where Kochukarambi is trying to give on the first death anniversary of, or before that, the first Shankranti after the death of Thevan, how to appease his soul. She is afraid that she has made a promise that she would not marry again. That's her problem.
So I don't think you should give away the ending here. I request all of you to pick up the book from the stall and then have a conversation about this.
This is the way the story progresses. So you don't want me to read the last part? No.
We have run out of time, and there's sort of sign languages directed towards me to sort of end the session now. So I think we have...
we can take about 2 questions. And then we'll wrap up.
Yeah. So I know in Kerala there's technically 3 regions, right? You have north, central, south. So are there any differences in the techniques, the writing style, the themes covered within these 3, which is kind of carried forward in this book? Yeah. So.
Are you asking me about the stories?
Yeah, and the stories selected and the popular stories, like are there any differences?
No, I haven't given any consideration.
Have you given, have you given geographical considerations?
No, I haven't looked at geography at all.
No, I'm saying, are there any particular differences that, I'm not saying that you've considered it, but are there any differences that you noticed when you looked at these works, or the differences that these regions have in terms of the stories?
No, that naturally comes in, it's represented in literature, for example, the kind of customs and belief systems in the north, like the Teyyam Tira, these things are not exactly the same way, in the south also this ancestor worship is there, spirit worship is there, but not in the same way. Things are different. Or like a deity like Muttappan, it's not there in the south. So there are differences like that, but generally the kind of themes that are covered are the same. Yeah.
But linguistically, there's...
linguistically, there are the writing, for example, M.T. Vasudevana writes in the Valluvanadan dialect. And Mukundan writes in the North Malabar dialect. These dialects are there very much even now. It's not standard Malayalam that everyone is writing.
Okay.
In narrative style is there, of course it is there, because the influence of the social media is very much there, and that's just one thing. Other things are, the politics. I don't want to go into the details of that. All that, comes, these are coming in because they became manifest only in the first and second, now the third decade of the 21st century. So all these are covered, and these are the essential differences now. Now in the, say, even in the late 20th century, till then we have a kind of continuity. Maybe from the beginning of the 90s, you have a, great different churning taking place because of the market economy coming in, globalization, this and that, and then the information superhighway. All these things change the way people look at things, and their facts of their life, their material life, everything has changed from there. So that change is happening, it's beginning, it's showing in the other stories. Some of the stories of the 21st century I have included are, again, stories which have resonances to the, to the earlier ones, or continuation like that. M.T. Vasudevana's story is a kind of feminist story. No feminist has written. It is more feminist than the feminist. Written in 1998. The Vision. If you have the book, you can see written.
Okay, there's a question for...
I have a question for Aienla. Were there any surprising discoveries you made while you were curating the greatest series in any of the languages? Some of the short stories that weren't that popular when they were originally published or written, revisited?
Actually, no, because I wasn't doing the selection, right?
it was the editors who were doing the selection. So, but I think as a whole, this series, I think it has introduced a lot of short stories to the English language reader. Normally, they wouldn't have read it in the original languages, but I think it just made the original languages much popular. So I think we're very proud of the fact that we covered the length and breadth of the country, from Kashmir in the north to Tamil, Malayalam in the south, from Bengali, Oriya in the east to Gujarati in the west, and the languages in between. So yeah.
Fantastic. All right, so.
And, I think.
And then there's the one. I mean, I think it's quite ironic that we don't have Kannada stories, and we are.
No, we had invited Chintan to come, but he's in the US and he wasn't able to make it.
Just say one thing about this, because like Aienla said, there's no platform for short story in translation.
Correct.
Novels and non-fiction, they are there in the arena of translation from all the languages. But the short story, I think she's the one who has given a break.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So, so you must be familiar with the writings of Bashir, Paul Zakaria, Sarah Joseph, etc. from Malayalam. And those are known writers outside of the Malayali circles. But if you want to read the writings of, say, Rajalakshmi, who committed suicide brilliant writer who committed suicide at the age of 35, C. Ayyappan short stories, Ashokan Cheruval, whose story is titled Jenny. There are many. How many Jennies are there in Andikad? Yeah, that's a fantastic story. It talks about the fall of communism. E. Harikumar, Padmarajan, the screenwriter, Aimanam Joshi, Aimanam is a famous village made famous by Arundhati Roy in God of Small Things. So there is a fantastic collection of short stories beyond what is popularly known from Malayalam. So do pick up the book if you feel that you want to breach the surface of vernacular literature, and do pick up other books from the series so that you can do so for other languages. Thank you very much. You've been a lovely audience. Thank you.